On a chilly autumn morning in London, the usually quiet corridors of Horse Guards buzzed with unusual energy. The air was thick with anticipation as whispers spread like wildfire among the staff and officers stationed there. Something extraordinary was about to happen, something that hadn't occurred in years. Word had it that he was coming. Not just anyone, but the big boss, a man whose name carried weight far beyond his physical presence. He was an enigmatic figure, someone who preferred staying out of the public eye, yet his influence stretched across industries, governments, and even personal lives. His rare appearances were always memorable, often tied to events of great importance. And now, for reasons no one could yet fathom, he was visiting Horse Guards. The news sent everyone into a flurry of activity. Officers exchanged hurried glances, their faces a mix of excitement and anxiety. Junior staff scrambled to ensure every detail was perfect. Dust was swept from corners where it hadn't settled in months, and windows sparkled under the pale sunlight filtering through the clouds. Uniforms were inspected with meticulous care. Not a single thread was left out of place. Medals gleamed on chests, polished until they reflected light like tiny mirrors. Even the ceremonial swords, rarely used except on special occasions, were sharpened and cleaned until they looked brand new. But it wasn't just the physical preparations that consumed everyone's attention. It was the mystery surrounding his visit. Why had he chosen today? What did he want? No one knew for sure, and that uncertainty only added to the tension. Some speculated that this might be part of a high-level diplomatic mission, given recent global events. Others thought it could be related to some kind of prestigious award or recognition ceremony. A few even joked nervously that maybe he'd come simply because he liked the architecture. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear: nothing about this day would be ordinary. As the clock ticked closer to noon, the atmosphere grew heavier. People stood at their posts, trying to appear calm, but failing miserably. Officers adjusted their caps repeatedly, while clerks shuffled papers unnecessarily, all in an attempt to distract themselves from the mounting pressure. Outside, the streets leading up to Horse Guards were eerily quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic. It felt as though the entire city was holding its breath, waiting for the moment when the man himself would arrive. Finally, the gates began to creak open. Everyone froze, their eyes fixed on the entrance. A sleek black car rolled in smoothly, its engine barely making a sound. For a brief moment, time seemed to stop. Then, the car door opened, and out stepped the big boss, clad in an impeccably tailored suit that screamed authority without being overbearing. He exuded confidence with every step. His piercing gaze scanned the surroundings, taking in the scene before him. As he moved forward, flanked by aides and security personnel, the crowd parted instinctively, creating a path for him. Silence fell over the area, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. To truly grasp why the big boss's visit sent shockwaves through Horse Guards, one must first understand the man himself. Born into a world of privilege and influence, he was not just another wealthy figurehead. He was a force to be reckoned with. From an early age, his life had been shrouded in mystery, carefully guarded by those around him. While others flaunted their wealth or status, he preferred to operate behind the scenes, pulling strings and shaping outcomes without ever stepping into the spotlight. Yet, despite his reclusive nature, stories about him were everywhere. Some true, some exaggerated, but all fascinating. The big boss wasn't always known by that title. In his younger years, he earned his reputation through sheer determination and sharp intellect. He didn't inherit his power on a silver platter. Instead, he built it brick by brick, navigating treacherous waters where one wrong move could mean disaster. People whispered about how he once turned a failing business into a global empire almost overnight. Others talked about his uncanny ability to predict market trends, staying 10 steps ahead of everyone else. But what set him apart wasn't just his success, it was his vision. He saw possibilities where others saw dead ends, and he acted decisively when others hesitated. Over time, his influence grew beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. Politicians sought his counsel, entrepreneurs begged for his investment, and even celebrities found themselves drawn to his orbit. His name became synonymous with authority, respect, and fear. Some admired him for his brilliance, while others resented him for his unrelenting drive. Love him or hate him, no one could deny the impact he had on the world. Decisions made in private meetings involving him often rippled outward, affecting economies, policies, and even everyday lives. He was the kind of person who could change the course of history with a single phone call, and everyone knew it. Yet, for all his power, the big boss remained elusive. Unlike other high-profile figures who craved attention, he avoided cameras, interviews, and public appearances. When he did show up somewhere, it was always deliberate, calculated, and meaningful. These rare outings became legendary, talked about for years afterward. There was the time he attended a charity gala and quietly donated millions without announcing it. Or the story of how he visited a struggling factory town, listened to workers' grievances, and later funded initiatives to revive the local economy. Each appearance added another layer to his enigmatic persona, leaving people hungry for more glimpses into his world. So, when word spread that the big boss was coming to Horse Guards, imaginations ran wild. What could possibly bring such a towering figure to this historic institution? Was it tied to national security? Perhaps he intended to honor someone, or something, with his presence. Maybe it was personal, linked to memories from his own past. Whatever the reason, it was clear that this visit carried significance far beyond routine protocol. Officers and staff couldn't help but feel they were part of something bigger than themselves, standing at the intersection of history and legend. As the day unfolded, curiosity deepened. Who exactly was this man beneath the polished exterior? What drove him to wield his immense power the way he did? And most importantly, what message would he leave behind after his departure? These questions lingered in the minds of everyone present, turning what might have been a simple visit into an event brimming with intrigue and anticipation. Little did they know, the answers would come not in words alone, but through actions that would leave an indelible mark on Horse Guards, and on them personally. The moment news of the big boss's impending arrival reached Horse Guards, chaos erupted behind closed doors. It was as if a storm had swept through the building, leaving everyone scrambling to ensure perfection. Senior officers barked orders left and right, their voices echoing down the long, polished hallways. "Check the uniforms again," one shouted. "Make sure every medal is aligned properly," another demanded. Meanwhile, junior staff darted around like busy ants, trying to keep up with the whirlwind of instructions. No detail was too small to escape scrutiny, not even the placement of chairs in the meeting room or the angle at which ceremonial swords were displayed. In the grand hall, cleaners worked tirelessly, scrubbing floors until they gleamed under the soft morning light streaming through the tall windows. Portraits of wartime heroes lining the walls were dusted carefully, ensuring not a single speck remained. Even the air seemed fresher, thanks to the sudden influx of floral arrangements placed strategically throughout the space. Every corner of Horse Guards was inspected, from the opulent reception areas to the modest offices where modern strategists plotted their next moves. Nothing could be overlooked, not when the big boss himself was on his way. Amidst the flurry of activity, rumors swirled like wildfire. What exactly was he coming for? Some speculated it might involve a high-level diplomatic discussion, given recent global tensions. Others thought it could be related to an upcoming award ceremony, perhaps honoring someone within the ranks. A few even joked nervously that maybe he just wanted to see how well the place was run. Whatever the reason, the pressure to impress him weighed heavily on everyone's shoulders. Officers exchanged anxious glances, silently wondering if all their efforts would be enough to satisfy such a formidable figure. For the junior staff, the stakes felt especially high. Many of them had never met the big boss before and only knew him through stories, tales of his sharp mind, commanding presence, and exacting standards. They'd heard about how he noticed everything, no matter how minor, and how he expected nothing less than excellence. This knowledge made them double-check their work obsessively. One young clerk spent nearly 20 minutes adjusting the alignment of folders on a desk, terrified that even the slightest imperfection might catch his eye. Another officer rehearsed his salute repeatedly in front of a mirror, determined to get it just right. As the clock ticked closer to noon, the tension reached its peak. Uniforms were adjusted one final time, shoes polished until they sparkled, and last-minute pep talks were given to boost morale. Everyone took their positions, standing tall and trying to appear calm despite the nerves bubbling beneath the surface. Outside, the streets leading up to Horse Guards were eerily quiet, as though the entire city was holding its breath alongside them. Inside, the hum of whispered conversations filled the air, each voice tinged with excitement, curiosity, and a touch of fear. Despite the mounting pressure, there was also a sense of pride. Being chosen as the venue for such a rare visit was an honor, a testament to the hard work and dedication of everyone stationed there. For many, this day wasn't just about preparing for the big boss. It was about proving themselves worthy of his attention. As they stood ready, waiting for the moment he would step through the gates, they couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions: anticipation, awe, and a deep desire to make a lasting impression. Little did they know, their preparations were about to pay off in ways none of them could have imagined. At precisely noon, the gates of Horse Guards creaked open, with a slow, deliberate motion that seemed to echo louder than usual. All eyes turned toward the entrance as a sleek black car glided silently into view. The vehicle moved with an air of authority, its polished surface reflecting the pale autumn sunlight like a mirror. For a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. The world outside faded away, the distant hum of traffic, the rustling leaves, even the nervous chatter inside the building, all drowned out by the collective intake of breath from those watching. The car came to a smooth halt before the main entrance, and for a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, the door opened. Out stepped the big boss, his presence commanding immediate silence. Clad in an impeccably tailored suit that fit him like a second skin, he exuded power without saying a word. His posture was upright but relaxed, his movements deliberate yet effortless. Every detail about him, from the shine of his shoes to the confident tilt of his head, spoke volumes about who he was and what he represented. As he ascended the steps leading into Horse Guards, flanked by aides and security personnel, all eyes followed his every move. Officers stood at attention, their backs ramrod straight, their faces masks of professionalism. Yet beneath their composed exteriors, hearts raced and palms grew clammy. Even seasoned veterans found themselves holding their breath, unsure whether they should feel honored or intimidated, or perhaps both. This wasn't just any visitor. This was the big boss, a man whose reputation loomed larger than life itself. What struck everyone most was how calm he appeared. There was no rush in his stride, no hint of impatience or discomfort. Instead, he carried himself with an aura of quiet confidence, as though he belonged exactly where he was. His piercing gaze swept across the scene before him, taking in every detail with precision. It was said that the big boss missed nothing. And seeing him now, it was easy to believe. He noticed things others overlooked: the slight tremor in a junior officer's salute, the faint crease on a ceremonial flag hanging nearby, the way sunlight caught the edge of a polished sword. Nothing escaped his attention. When he finally reached the top step, he paused briefly, allowing the gravity of the moment to sink in. The crowd around him remained still, almost afraid to breathe. Then, with a subtle nod, a gesture so small it might have gone unnoticed, he acknowledged those gathered. It wasn't much, but it was enough. That single nod conveyed respect, recognition, and perhaps even gratitude. In that instant, the tension in the air softened ever so slightly, replaced by a sense of awe and admiration. Inside, preparations had been flawless, but now, faced with the reality of his arrival, doubts lingered. Had they done enough? Would he approve? These questions buzzed quietly in the minds of those present, though no one dared voice them aloud. As the big boss disappeared through the grand doors, escorted by senior officers, the atmosphere shifted once again. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd outside, each person sharing their impressions of what they'd just witnessed. Some marveled at his composure, while others recounted how his mere presence had made them feel both insignificant and inspired. For many, this was more than just a rare visit. It was a defining moment, one they would recount for years to come. Whether it was his calm demeanor, his commanding presence, or simply the weight of his legacy, the big boss had left an indelible mark before even stepping foot inside the building. And as the doors closed behind him, anticipation swelled. What would happen next? Whatever it was, everyone knew it would be unforgettable. Once inside Horse Guards, the big boss disappeared into a private meeting room alongside top-ranking officials. The heavy wooden doors clicked shut behind him, leaving the rest of the building in suspense. For hours, no sound escaped the chamber except the occasional murmur of hushed voices. Outside, curiosity burned like wildfire. Officers and staff exchanged nervous glances, their imaginations running wild with possibilities. What could they be discussing? Was it a matter of national security, a secret strategy session, or something entirely unexpected? The wait felt endless. Junior staff lingered near water coolers or pretended to busy themselves with paperwork, all while straining their ears for any clue about what was happening behind those closed doors. Some whispered theories, piecing together fragments of information they'd overheard earlier. Others simply stood frozen, staring at the door as if willing it to open. Even senior officers, usually unflappable, seemed uneasy, their polished demeanors cracking under the weight of uncertainty. Inside the room, however, the atmosphere was focused and intense. The big boss sat at the head of a long mahogany table, his sharp eyes scanning documents laid out before him. Around him, high-ranking officials leaned forward attentively, hanging on his every word. His voice was calm but firm, cutting through the tension like a knife. He asked probing questions, challenging assumptions and demanding clarity. Nothing slipped past him, not a misplaced statistic, not a vague explanation. It was clear that this wasn't just a casual discussion. It was a masterclass in leadership and decision-making. As the meeting stretched on, snippets of information began leaking out, tiny details shared by aides who slipped in and out of the room to fetch files or deliver messages. One officer mentioned hearing the phrase long-term strategy, while another caught wind of something about international partnerships. These tidbits only fueled the speculation outside. Could this visit be tied to global diplomacy? Or perhaps it involved plans for modernizing military operations? No one knew for sure, but each new whisper added another layer to the mystery. Despite the secrecy, there was an undeniable sense of purpose in the air. Those who glimpsed the big boss during brief moments when the door opened noticed how intently he listened, how carefully he weighed each point before responding. He didn't rush decisions or rely on gut feelings alone. Instead, he approached every topic methodically, considering both immediate implications and long-term consequences. It was a reminder of why he commanded such respect, and why his presence here today carried so much weight. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the meeting concluded. The doors swung open, and the big boss emerged, flanked once again by his entourage. His expression gave nothing away, no hint of satisfaction, frustration, or fatigue. If anything, he looked even more composed than when he'd arrived. As he moved down the hallway, people instinctively stepped aside, creating space for him to pass. Yet despite his reserved demeanor, there was an unmistakable energy radiating from him, an aura of resolve that left everyone wondering what had transpired in that room. For now, the specifics remained a closely guarded secret, but one thing was certain: whatever had been discussed would have far-reaching effects. Officers exchanged knowing looks, sensing that they were witnessing the beginning of something significant. And though answers wouldn't come immediately, the anticipation only grew stronger. After all, when the big boss made a move, the world paid attention. and Horse Guards was no exception. After the intense and secretive meeting, no one expected what happened next. Just as people began to think the big boss would leave without further interaction, he surprised everyone by requesting a tour of Horse Guards. It wasn't a demand but a quiet, almost casual suggestion, yet it sent waves of panic rippling through the staff. A tour, of all things. This hadn't been part of the plan. Officers scrambled to adjust, ensuring every room, hallway, and display was ready for his inspection. Accompanied by senior officials, the big boss walked slowly through the building, taking in its history and grandeur with evident interest. He didn't rush. Instead, he moved deliberately, pausing occasionally to examine artifacts, photographs, and memorabilia lining the walls. At one point, he stopped before a glass case containing medals awarded to soldiers decades ago. His gaze lingered on them, his expression unreadable. Then, turning to an officer beside him, he asked, "Do you know their stories?" The question caught the officer off guard, but he quickly nodded and began recounting tales of bravery and sacrifice. To everyone's astonishment, the big boss listened intently, nodding thoughtfully as if each story mattered deeply to him. As the tour continued, his curiosity became even more apparent. He asked about the significance of certain paintings, the origins of ceremonial uniforms, and the evolution of military strategies over time. His questions weren't superficial. They were thoughtful, probing, and showed a genuine desire to understand. For many, this side of him was unexpected. They had imagined him as distant and unapproachable, yet here he was, engaging with the smallest details of their institution's legacy. It was as though he wanted to connect, not just with the place, but with the people who kept its traditions alive. Then came the moment that left everyone speechless. As they approached a plaque honoring fallen soldiers, the big boss paused again. Without saying a word, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a single red rose. Carefully, almost reverently, he placed it atop the plaque. The gesture was simple, yet profoundly moving. No cameras flashed, no speeches were made. It was a private act of respect that spoke volumes. Those watching felt a lump rise in their throats, overwhelmed by the weight of the moment. Here was a man known for his power and influence, choosing to honor ordinary heroes in such a humble way. The impact of this gesture rippled through the group accompanying him. Officers exchanged glances, some blinking back tears, others straightening their posture as if reminded of why they served in the first place. Even the junior staff peeking from nearby corners couldn't help but feel touched. In that brief moment, the big boss revealed a side of himself few had ever seen: humility amidst immense authority. It was a reminder that behind the title and reputation lay a human being capable of empathy and reflection. By the time the tour concluded, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. What had started as a day filled with nerves and uncertainty now carried a sense of quiet inspiration. People whispered among themselves, sharing how moved they were by his actions. Some admitted they'd underestimated him, assuming his visit would be purely formal or transactional. Instead, he had shown genuine interest in their work, their history, and their sacrifices. And while much about him remained enigmatic, one thing was clear. The big boss wasn't just there to observe. He was there to remember, to honor, and perhaps to learn. As he prepared to depart, the mood was no longer tense but reflective. Everyone knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, not just the arrival of a powerful figure, but the unveiling of a deeper truth about leadership, legacy, and the shared humanity that binds us all. Before departing, the big boss did something that no one had anticipated. He requested to address the assembled crowd. Word spread quickly, and within minutes, officers, staff, and even junior clerks gathered beneath the iconic arches of Horse Guards. The space buzzed with quiet excitement as people jostled for a better view, their earlier nervousness replaced by eager anticipation. This was unprecedented. Rarely did the big boss speak publicly, let alone to a group like this. What would he say? Would it be formal and diplomatic, or personal and heartfelt. No one knew, but everyone leaned in, hanging on his every move. Standing tall before the crowd, the big boss exuded an aura of calm authority. He didn't use a microphone or podium. Instead, he spoke directly, his voice carrying effortlessly across the courtyard. "This place," he began, his tone measured yet warm, "is more than brick and mortar. It is a testament to courage, duty, and the enduring spirit of those who serve." His words were simple, yet they struck a chord deep within everyone present. There was no grandstanding, no attempt to impress, just raw sincerity that resonated with each listener. He went on to reflect on the history of Horse Guards, acknowledging its role not only in military operations, but also in shaping the values of loyalty, discipline, and sacrifice. He spoke of the countless men and women who had walked these halls, dedicating their lives to something greater than themselves. "You carry their legacy forward," he said, his gaze sweeping over the sea of faces before him. "And in doing so, you remind us all of what truly matters." What made his speech unforgettable wasn't just the content, it was the way he delivered it. There was no trace of arrogance or condescension in his voice. Instead, he spoke as though he were one of them, someone who understood the weight of responsibility and the pride that came with serving a higher purpose. When he mentioned the plaque honoring fallen soldiers and the rose he had placed there earlier, his voice softened, tinged with emotion. "We must never forget," he said simply, "that freedom is paid for in blood and sweat, and we honor those sacrifices, not with words, but with action." As he continued, his message shifted from reflection to encouragement. He urged everyone to remain steadfast in their commitment, not just to their duties, but to each other. "Strength lies not in titles or ranks," he emphasized, "but in unity, in standing together, supporting one another, and remembering why you chose this path." These weren't empty platitudes. They felt genuine, spoken by someone who genuinely believed in them. When he finished speaking, there was a moment of silence, followed by spontaneous applause. People clapped not because they felt obligated, but because they were moved. Some wiped away tears, while others stood a little taller, inspired by his words. For many, it was a defining moment, a reminder of why they had joined this institution in the first place. Even those who had been skeptical about his visit found themselves won over, their doubts replaced by admiration. As the big boss stepped back, nodding slightly to acknowledge the applause, the mood in the courtyard shifted once again. The initial awe and tension had transformed into something deeper: respect, gratitude, and renewed determination. His speech hadn't just been a formality. It had been a call to action, a challenge to live up to the ideals he had so eloquently described. And as he turned to leave, escorted by his aides, the crowd parted silently, watching him go with a mix of reverence and inspiration. For those who remained behind, the echoes of his words lingered long after he disappeared from sight. They knew this day would stay etched in their memories, not just because of who he was, but because of what he had reminded them to be: courageous, united, and unwavering in their dedication to service. When the big boss finally departed, the atmosphere at Horse Guards shifted once again. The initial excitement and tension gave way to a quieter, more reflective mood. People stood in small groups, exchanging thoughts about what had just happened. Conversations buzzed with energy, but they were different now, less about speculation and more about reflection. Everyone seemed to be processing the day's events, trying to make sense of how one man's brief visit could leave such a profound impact. For hours after his departure, stories spread like wildfire. Officers recounted how he had paused before the plaque honoring fallen soldiers, placing a single red rose with quiet reverence. Junior staff whispered about the thoughtful questions he'd asked during the tour, marveling at how he noticed even the smallest details. Others talked about his speech, quoting lines that had resonated deeply with them. "Strength lies not in titles or ranks, but in unity." These moments weren't just anecdotes. They were lessons, reminders of why they served, and what their work truly meant. As the day wore on, the physical presence of the big boss faded, but his influence lingered. In offices and common areas, people found themselves revisiting old photographs and artifacts, inspired by his curiosity about their history. Some officers took extra care to explain the significance of certain traditions to newer recruits, ensuring that the legacy he had honored would continue to be passed down. Even junior staff, who might have felt invisible earlier in the day, walked a little taller, knowing they played a part in something much larger than themselves. Over the following weeks, the effects of his visit rippled outward. Stories of the day traveled far beyond Horse Guards, reaching ears across the city and beyond. Journalists wrote articles speculating about the purpose of his trip, while social media lit up with posts from those lucky enough to witness it firsthand. For many outside observers, it was a rare glimpse into the life of an enigmatic figure, a man whose actions often shaped the world yet remained shrouded in mystery. But for those inside Horse Guards, the narrative was simpler. This wasn't just about power or prestige. It was about connection, respect, and shared humanity. In the days that followed, subtle changes began to emerge within the institution itself. Meetings started with discussions about teamwork and unity, echoing themes from the big boss's speech. Training sessions emphasized not only technical skills, but also the importance of remembering the sacrifices made by those who came before. Even casual conversations carried a renewed sense of purpose, as if everyone had been reminded of why they chose this path in the first place. Yet, despite all the talk, some mysteries remained unsolved. Why had he chosen today to visit? What exactly had transpired during that closed-door meeting? No official statement was released, leaving room for endless speculation. Some believed it was tied to upcoming strategic decisions, while others thought it might have been a personal pilgrimage of sorts. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear. His visit had sparked something, a shift in perspective, a rekindling of pride, and a deeper appreciation for the weight of their responsibilities. Months later, when the memory of his arrival began to fade into legend, its impact endured. New recruits heard tales of the day the big boss came to Horse Guards, learning not just about the man himself, but about the values he represented. Veterans smiled knowingly when these stories were told, recalling how his words and actions had reignited their own sense of duty. And though life eventually returned to its usual rhythm, the memory of his rare appearance remained. A reminder that even the most powerful figures are human after all, capable of humility, empathy, and inspiration. In the end, the big boss didn't just visit Horse Guards. He left behind a legacy. Not through grand gestures or sweeping reforms, but through small, meaningful acts that touched hearts and minds. It was proof that true leadership isn't about commanding attention. It's about earning respect, fostering unity, and inspiring others to become the best versions of themselves. And for everyone at Horse Guards, that lesson would stay with them forever.